Wonderful. So we are here for the last presentation of the day today, and I am very happy to introduce Dr. Shannon Lane. Dr. Lane is an associate professor at the Wurzweiler School of Social Work at Yeshiva University and the associate director of dissertation advising for the Wurzweiler PhD program. She began her career working for United States Senator Tom Daschle while still an undergraduate at the George Washington University. She received her MSW from the University of Michigan and returned to Capitol Hill to work for Senators Daschle, Pryor, and Nelson. Dr. Lane received a PhD from the University of Connecticut School of Social Work in 2009, and her dissertation examined the experiences of social workers who had run for political office. Since 2004, she has been affiliated with the Nancy A. Humphreys Institute for Political Social Work at the University of Connecticut School of Social Work. She has taught social work, macro practice, and research at 4 universities. Dr. Lane is the author of several books, including Political Social Work, Using Power to Create Social Change, and Social Welfare Policy in a Changing World. Welcome, Dr. Lane.
Thank you. It's so nice to be here. I saw a couple of people do the hand raise when you mentioned the Humphreys Institute, so I know we've got some campaign school alums here. I do want to say it's only 2 books, so you said several, which makes me sound much fancier than I am. So I am very proud of them. They are my 3rd and 4th babies. And I also saw a Go UConn in the comments, so I will just point out I did get my PhD from UConn, home of the UConn women's Huskies, who just made the Final Four last night. So we are very proud of them. Although my Michigan women did not make the Final Four, so I will have to suffer with only one team in the Final Four. So I'm very excited to see you all. It's always a little bit of a challenge to be the last speaker of the day, because I know we've all been on Zoom and we're tired, but it does actually give me a chance to sort of give you a carry through all the great information that you've gotten today and sort of think about what to do with it. So I'm going to share my screen. And let me just kick it into slideshow gear. Jeff, can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Awesome, wonderful. So what I really want to talk about today is what social workers can do to make an impact in the political world. And so my title slide here, you see 3 of my favorite social workers. Dorothy Height, Dr. Dorothy Height, who was one of the leaders of the civil rights movement in the United States. Jeanette Rankin, who was the first woman ever to be elected to a national legislature anywhere in the world. She was elected to Congress before women in the United States even had the right to vote in most of the country. And Alice Paul, who was a leader in the women's suffrage movement and helping to get women the right to vote in the United States. And what I love about all 3 of these women is that they are spectacular. You know, it's Women's History Month as well as Social Work Month. But they also give us some really good inspiration for very different ways to get involved in the political process, right? Jeanette Rankin ran for office. Alice Paul, you know, protested in front of the White House and went on a hunger strike. And Dorothy Height was behind the scenes in every major decision of the civil rights movement. There are so many different ways that social workers can make an impact on the system, and these are some great examples of them. As Jeff mentioned, I teach at the Wurzweiler School of Social Work at Yeshiva University. Most people have not heard of Washington Heights area of New York where we're located unless they have seen the play or the movie In the Heights. So I'm grateful to Lin-Manuel Miranda for making sure people know where we are. This is my view from my office looking south, but next month I'm switching to an office that overlooks the GW Bridge. So I will wave at all of y'all in New Jersey when I get moved into my new office. And Jeff also mentioned that I'm affiliated with the Humphreys Institute. The Humphreys Institute was founded by Dr. Nancy A. Humphreys, who's in that top picture in the wheelchair. And our goal is to increase the political participation and power of all social workers and the communities that they serve, with a goal of changing the way that policy is made and changing the results of policy, and making sure that policy is reflective of our professional values and our commitment to social justice. And one of the things that we do that some of our attendees here have been to is that we run the campaign school for social workers. And if you are interested in that, you can reach out to me or you can reach out to Tanya Smith. We just finished our campaign school for this year, but we do it every year. It's a great opportunity if you're thinking about getting more involved in politics. So what I want to talk about today is first this question that hopefully by now you already think you know the answer to, of whether social workers should be involved in politics. I want to talk just a little bit about my path to getting involved. And then I want to talk a little bit about the two core concepts that I use in my work, which is political justice and political social work. And then end by really talking about, for those of you who are students, what are some of the things you can do now and some next steps that you can take. We've got time set aside at the end for questions, but you're welcome to throw questions in the chat. It's a little bit hard for me to see them while I'm presenting, but I will do my best to check in and then we can come back to them as we go. So keeping with my Lin-Manuel Miranda theme, I like to frame this question around one of the major themes from Hamilton. So when I think about whether social workers should be involved in politics, there's sort of two arguments that have been happening in the profession for as long as we've been around, right? So one is this idea on the left, this Aaron Burr idea of talk less, smile more, essentially that as social workers, we should be neutral professionals and we shouldn't get dirty. We shouldn't get into politics. We shouldn't get into the muck of things. We should just be sort of taking our cues from focusing in on making policies work for the folks that we work with. And the flip side of it is this Alexander Hamilton quote, right? If you stand for nothing, what will you fall for, right? That there's something about the core of being a social worker that requires us to get involved in the political system. Here's the deal. This is a false question because the answer is we are already involved. Social workers are the core of our job, cannot help but to connect with our political and policy system. Everything that we do, from how we get paid to do our work, to who's allowed to show up at our door, to everything in between, is affected by policy and politics. So I've got a couple examples here. This book on the top left, Facilitating Justice, is by a social worker, Dr. Yusun Park, and it looks at the ways that social workers were actively engaged in processing Japanese Americans into the internment camps during World War II, right? Not just that we stood by and did nothing, but we were actively a part of the internment of US citizens. The picture on the right is from a series of articles in the Washington Post a couple of years ago that sort of brought to light the fact that social workers and other mental health professionals who were engaging in direct practice with people who were in the refugee system found out that their case notes were being used in hearings to decide whether or not folks were allowed to stay in the United States. So both the mental health professionals and the folks that they worked with had assumed that these sessions that were helping individuals and refugees overcome trauma that they had experienced, it turns out that information then was actually being used in many cases against the folks that they had worked with as a reason to send them back to their home countries where they had experienced that trauma. And then this last picture is, a breaking news article from just a couple weeks ago. In 2020, in the midst of COVID and everything else, we did a census, and that census drastically undercounted people who were Black, people who are Latino and Latina, and people who are Native. And the results of that mean that not only will we have a disproportionate amount of political representation taken away from those communities, but it also means that fundamental resources will be missing from those communities, right? Resources for homelessness, resources for survivors of intimate partner violence, right? Resources for all of the things that we do as social workers are going to be fundamentally moved around to different parts of the country, primarily moved to places that are more white and more affluent because the census undercounted these communities. And so my argument, and I think the argument you've heard from other folks today, is we don't have a choice. We don't all need to be full-time politicians. We don't all need to be full-time policy practitioners, but policy and politics affect everything that we do, and we need to be tuned in and feel comfortable engaging with that system when it's necessary. So I'm a social worker. I've been a social worker for over 20 years now. This is my graduation picture from the University of Michigan back in the day. And my path to political social work is that I interned on Capitol Hill for my senator, who at the time was the junior senator from South Dakota. I do not know if my family knows that I use this picture of them with Tom Daschle in my presentations. I will have to ask them. Shout out to my dad who's in that picture. It was his birthday yesterday. And I was really incredibly lucky to have the opportunity to be in the right place at the right time and get to know the political system from the inside. And I loved working on the Hill. I got to do lots of things that made me feel like I had an impact on the policy process. But I also have had some incredible opportunities since I left the Hill to feel like I have a chance to influence the policy process. And since I left Capitol Hill in 2004 to come to UConn, I haven't worked full-time in politics since then. So I know often we think, it's great. There are so many opportunities to be a full-time political social worker, but I really want to highlight today all the ways that you can be involved as part of the rest of your life, as part of your other social work jobs, as part of the other things that you already do in your community. But when I left Michigan and I went back to Capitol Hill, I got asked this question all the time, which was, how come you decided not to be a social worker anymore? And you want to know who asked me this question the most? Other social workers. I got asked all the time, like, how come, why'd you leave? And I will be honest with you, for a little while, I bought into it. And I would say like, oh, I guess I'm just not a social worker anymore. And a couple years in, I don't know really what happened. I don't know. I guess I just got hit upside the head. And I realized that I was letting other people define for me who and what I was. And that's just not ever okay, right? And so my answer to that question is I've never left social work, right? I bring my social work values and my social work skills and everything that I learned in my MSW program to every interaction that I have with a lawmaker, to every interaction that I have with a community member, to every interaction that I have with a student, right? I am a social worker all the time. If you ask my children, they will say I'm a social worker too often of the time. That's a whole separate conversation. But if you have one takeaway from what I tell you all today, I want it to be that you get to decide what a social worker is. If you are living and working your social work values and taking those skills into what you do and making the world a better place, then you are being a social worker. Whether you are doing that working one-on-one with clients or groups or families, whether you are doing that as an elected official, whether you are like my friend Sally, and former student who for a while was the beauty editor, one of the beauty editors at Self Magazine, and made sure that Self Magazine was putting out body positive content that was reflective of the diversity of women in America, right? She was a social worker. She just wasn't working in a job that had the title of social worker. And I think, especially as we are, ending social work month, like it's such a good time to remember, like we came into this profession because for a whole bunch of reasons, right? We want to change the world. We want to make people's lives better. And there's a ton of ways to do that. And lots of you are going to do that in ways that don't have social worker in the title. But don't let anybody tell you that that means that you're not a social worker, because it's absolutely not true. All right, so let me give you some terminology that maybe you haven't thought about before. So we talk a lot about social justice in our schools of social work. We sometimes talk about economic justice. We don't always talk about political justice. This is a definition of political justice that comes from these amazing women on the left. So on the top is Gina Gunn McClendon. She's at WashU in St. Louis. Alessandra Lozano is at Common Cause in California. She was one of the leaders of voting rights work in Texas in the last election. And if you remember anything about voting rights in Texas during the last election, she worked her butt off. And at the bottom is Suzanne Pritzker, who's my friend and co-author and is at the University of Houston. And so this is the definition of political justice that they have created separately and together, which is that all members of society will have political justice when they have equal access to voting rights and to the broader mechanisms through which they influence political decision making. So what does that mean? That means that yes, voting rights are important. And I'll talk about voting because voting it's a key part of being a citizen of the United States. And it's a key part that those of us who are citizens can use to make sure that we create change on behalf of people who aren't eligible to vote. But we also need access to the other parts of the system, right? So you've been hearing people talk today about getting communities organized to make change at the local level or changing policy at the state level, right? we all need to have equal access to the people who are making decisions, right? We all need to be able to testify at a legislative hearing or go make an appointment with an elected official. And until we have that, we don't have true political justice. The fact of the matter is that democracy as a political philosophy relies on inclusive participation. And anyone who says, oh, back in the good old days, blah, 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 I'd be real curious to know what good old days they're talking about. Because as a concept, this has never happened in the United States, right? We started from way back in the day where white men over a certain age who had a certain amount of property were allowed to vote. I can only see a couple of people, but Alexandra, God bless you. I just thought you sneezed. We went from only white men with property could vote, and then we gradually expanded the franchise and expanded the franchise, right? We added in after the Civil War, we added in Black men, but then we instituted a bunch of literacy tests and poll taxes, right? And eventually we added in women, but what did that really mean? It really went white women, right? And we have gradually expanded the franchise as we've gone, but we have never gotten to the point where all of us have had access to inclusive participation. And that's a fight that we have to continue. And the fact is that when we have political injustice, it disproportionately affects the people who are already most marginalized in our society, right? So political injustice falls on the shoulders of folks who are Black, folks who are Latino and Latina, folks who are Native, folks in poverty, folks with serious health issues, people with mental health issues or psychiatric disabilities. And in sort of an intersectional way, right, it falls a lot on people who have criminal justice involvement who tend to also be disproportionately representative of some of those communities I already mentioned. So political justice is a great concept to think about when you're thinking about a new policy. Think about political justice, right? Does this policy advance political justice? Does it make it possible for people to have access to the system? And if it doesn't, then is it a good policy, and is it one that's in line with your values? The next definition I want to give you is political social work, which I've already been using today. So Suzanne and I define political social work as a practice that explicitly attends to the power dynamics in policymaking and the political mechanisms for making change. So political social work is more inclusive than just thinking about policy, because it sort of gets into all the nooks and crannies of the ways that policy is made in the United States. And it can include everything from legislative policy or executive branch signing, an executive order, but also thinking about power dynamics, right? Who's giving money to campaigns? That's about power. Who gets to be on TV to talk about their ideas? That's about power, right? Power is just a fundamental concept in our processes anywhere, but specifically in the United States. And political social work is social work that helps us to interact with those systems wherever we have the chance to interact with those systems. So I mentioned that I'd been a full-time political social worker, but the work that I've done for the last 15 years has all been, on the side in my spare time. So Suzanne and I define political social work in these 5 domains, and you can do all of these while you're a student. You don't have to do all of them at once, but you can do any of them as a student, and you can do any of them without being a full-time political social worker. So one of the domains is engaging people in the political process. So we're going to talk in a little bit about the Power of 3 voting campaign through voting as social work. That's a great way, right? Social workers, no matter what you're doing, you can help people register to vote, access their right to vote, find out if they're registered to vote, all of that. That's a very easy thing that can be incorporated into pretty much every bit of social work practice. We can influence political agendas and policy making. And one of the great ways to do this, right, is to, email your elected officials. One of the previous speakers mentioned some of the ways you can do this, but just last Friday, I had the opportunity to testify in front of a legislative committee. I live in Connecticut, and so we're trying to create a Voting Rights Act in the state of Connecticut. And so I had the chance to testify and talk about the ways in which people are being disenfranchised from voting in Connecticut, and how we could change our state constitution and our state legislation in order to change that. Social workers can hold professional and political positions. Certainly you can do this as a full-time job. You can be a policy analyst, you can be a legislative aide, you can do all sorts of cool things. You can also hold positions like being appointed to a commission in your town or your county, right? There's lots of political positions that are available. And often in most of the towns I've worked in, they are desperate for people to help out. Like my town has a cemetery commission. I don't know what they do, but they're very excited about it. We have a commission that makes sure that like the utility companies aren't messing with people. We have a commission that's like rethinking our town government. All of these are volunteer committees, and most of the people who sit on them are retired, because I think those are the people who like sort of know the system and know how to get involved. They are always looking for people who are younger and not white and not the same people to get involved in these. So there are incredible opportunities to do that. Another domain is engaging with political campaigns. And you know, there's lots of volunteer work to be done on campaigns, knocking on doors, sending texts. I don't really, this might come as a weird thing for a social worker, I don't love lots of people all that much. I like people like sort of on a very limited basis. And so door knocking is sort of my least favorite thing to do. I'll do it when I have to, but I'm much happier. Like I can send text messages to voters all night long. I'll do that as long as you want me to do. And the other thing is that you can run for office, right? And you can run for something that's at the state and federal level that takes a lot of time, or you can run for your school board. How desperately do we need people in the school board right now who are thinking from a social work lens? I ran for school board last year. My friend Kate says to say that I didn't lose. So I won't say that I lost, but I didn't win. By 47 votes, I didn't win. But it was a tremendous opportunity. I got to know a lot of my neighbors. I wave at them now when I'm going for a walk. But I also talked to people about, we don't have a social worker in our school. We're the only school in our school. We are the only school district in our area that doesn't have social workers. And I got to tell people why I think that's a bad idea. I got to talk to people about the mental health effects of COVID and what's going on with that. I got to talk to people about the fact that our kindergartners need more than 20 minutes of recess a day, right? Like those are conversations I got to have with everyone in my community. And now when I show up at school board meetings, when I show up at things at, you know, the principal's coffee hour, I have a different sort of visibility, right? People know who I am and they listen to me in a different way than they did before. So even though I didn't win, I'm really grateful that I ran, and I think it's been an incredible opportunity for me. If you are super comfortable in the micro place, there are some great things that you can do in political social work. If you are super comfortable in the macro place, there are great things that you can do in political social work, and sort of everything on that continuum. So I wanted to use this as an example. I do a lot of work. I wrote an article right before the election about the fact that we have so many people in this country who are denied the right to vote because they've had an involvement with the criminal justice system. And the laws about whether or not you can vote after a conviction are based on the state level. So there's a lot of variety across the country. But in a lot of places, we have these very racist laws that were created during the Jim Crow time deliberately, to be plain, to keep people who are African American from being able to engage with voting. And those laws have, like, maybe they're written a little bit more race neutrally now, but they still disenfranchise huge chunks of people, disproportionately those who are Black. And so one of the things you can do if you're interested in this issue is the very easy first step, right? Go to the Brennan Center for Justice, find out what the laws are where you are. And if you're working with folks in this population and they're eligible to vote, help them register to vote. Make sure that you make sure that they know how to do that. Crystal, you asked a question in the chat of which election. If you mean which election did I write this before, it was the 2020 election. Sorry, there've been a couple since then, my bad. You know, it can be hard to figure out if you're eligible to vote, right? So just helping somebody figure that out, connecting them with an organization that's doing that work, right? That's very good micro level work. And there are great organizations everywhere doing this. You don't have to do it on your own. You can partner with folks. You can also advocate to change the laws. So we're trying to change the law in Connecticut so that you never lose your right to vote when you're incarcerated. There are 2 states currently that have that law. We would like to be the 3rd. It's an uphill battle. We've been doing it for a couple of years. We're going to keep doing it until we win. You could work for an elected official. You could help them write a new law, or you could run for office, right? And you could be at the table when that decision is made. So whatever the issue is that inspires you, there's a whole range of micro to macro in which you can do that work. And you can sort of go back and forth, right? I do a little bit of registering individual voters and a little bit of advocating on the state level, right? You can do all of the above. I know that a lot of you are students, and I know that student life has a lot already in it. And so sometimes you come to events like today and you think, sure, I have the time to go do these 47 other new things that you people think that social work students can do. So first of all, let me just validate that. It was a while ago, but I got my MSW while interning full time and working 2 jobs full time. And I don't think I slept for 2 years. So we hear you. But here's the really cool thing is that you can incorporate this stuff into what you're already doing. And you can think about how could you sort of take advantage of these opportunities to set you up to do more political work when you graduate, if that's something you're interested in. So for example, if you're not all done with your internships, if you still have another internship in front of you, maybe there's an opportunity to do an internship at the ACLU or at NASW or at a place that will give you some good practice doing some of this political stuff. If you're already in an internship, most of our agencies are doing advocacy work. Is there a chance to do some of that advocacy as part of your internship? In the previous presentation, there was some talk about coalitions, which are so important, right? Like the ACLU needs to partner with this person, needs to partner with the immigrant rights group. Like they've all got to work together to make something happen, right? And if you're working in advocacy with one of those organizations, you get to know all the rest of them, right? And so you get to expand your network, your professional network into more groups. So my goal for all y'all is that you make at least one commitment out of the next 3 slides. And if you do all 3, you email me and I will send you virtual bonus stars. Okay. I don't know. I'm a big fan. I need gold stars for like pretty much everything that I do in my life. So the first is that the National Social Work Voter Mobilization Campaign, which is too long and too hard to say, so we just call it Voting is Social Work, has just started this Power of 3 campaign. And you can go to the Voting is Social Work website and you can click on the Power of 3 pledge. And what you're committing to is that you're going to talk to 3 people about voting. And they can be friends, family members, clients, professors. I did a voting drive once and my students knocked on the door. It turned out they were knocking on the door of our university president. And so they checked to make sure our university president was registered to vote. She was. Talk to 3 people in your life and say anything like, are you registered to vote? Do you want me to help you check your voter registration? Is there information that you need that would make voting easier for you? And if you don't know how to do any of that, that's fine, because everything you would need to help answer those questions is on the Voting is Social Work website. NASW has partnered with this campaign. A number of other national social work organizations have partnered with this campaign. This is something that we are really hoping is going to make a difference over the next couple of years. And think about this just for a second. There are roughly 700,000 social workers in the United States, right? If all of us just talk to 3 people, what an incredible difference would that make? All right, so this is step number 1. Go sign up for the Voting is Social Work. Shonda, I'm so sorry to hear about your loss. And Ricia pointed out that you can go to Vote ER. Vote ER is a great website for this. It's linked through the Voting is Social Work website. They can give you, where's my lanyard? I have my lanyard all the time. They can give you great resources. I'll see if I can take out my lanyard in a second. All right, number 2, you can become a poll worker. Probably most people didn't think about poll workers and elections officials at all before the last election, and now they're in the news a lot. And this study just came out that 1 in 5 local elections officials says they're going to quit before 2024. I serve as an elections official. I'm the deputy registrar of voter in my town. There are great ways to be a poll worker, and often you can get field hours for doing it. Ask your school. Often, those of you, if there's anybody here who's already licensed, some states are offering CEUs for it. I don't know if New Jersey is one of them, but Jeff, if they aren't, they should. Pennsylvania offers CEs to work the polls, and Ohio offers CEs to work the polls. Here's the great thing about being a poll worker. You get to serve your community. You get to see really how elections are run. It's the best thing I ever did to understand elections. And you get paid. It's money. what could be better? So I've included 3 links here because I know we've got some folks from New Jersey and some folks from Delaware here. And then I also have included the link for the for a national website that you can click on to find out how to be a poll worker in your town. The picture on the bottom right here is my daughters who came in to visit the poll while we were getting set up for election day. And we were watching, after the election this last year, we were watching, I think it was Kamala Harris did a shout out to poll workers, and my kids like danced around the room and they were like, she's talking to you. And I was like, yes, she's talking to me. She knows me. Definitely the case. So that's number 2. So the voting is social work, become a poll worker. And this is the last thing, and my kids are going to stick around for this one as well. Figure out what your purpose is, right? So I don't want you to go find a new thing to add to this already huge pile of responsibilities you have. I want you to think about what's important to you and what you're already doing and why you're doing it, and then find something that helps you to meet that purpose, right? So my purpose is these 2. If I can get involved in something and it's going to make the world a better place for them, I say yes to it. And, and that includes things that affect them directly, like the school board. It also includes things like, addressing climate change, because I would like the world to still be around when they're grown-ups. But if something doesn't meet that criteria, then I say no, because then for me, it's not a good use of my time. And so if the reason you became a social worker is you want to fix homelessness, you want to fix domestic violence, you want to help people who are struggling with addiction, right? Find a way to incorporate some more of a political aspect into that work that you're doing. I don't know if you can read it on the left. Their shirts say, I can't vote, but you can. And these pictures on the right are the 2 of them. These poor kids have been dragged to political rallies since they were, too small to walk. They also know that if they're quiet enough at a political event, I will keep shoving food at them. So they love going to political events because they get all the junk food. But listen, if my kids can go walk in a parade, then there's definitely something that you can do to help you serve your purpose. And then sort of my last tip is to find your people, probably a lot of whom you've already met today, right? So reach out to NASW, some of the organizations represented here. CRISP is the Congressional Research Institute for Social Work and Policy. These are all lists of folks who do really, really great work in this space. Vote ER is here on this list as well. And they're really amazing, amazing resources. I'm going to stop there. After I give you a quote, because I cannot talk about voting without talking about Congressman Lewis and Stacey Abrams, right? So Stacey Abrams says we need active and relentless participation in our elections and government. Yes. And Congressman Lewis says your vote is the most powerful nonviolent tool that we have to create a perfect union. And so that's why this work is important, right? This is the why that we do this work, and it's why it's so important for social workers. And I would love to answer questions that you have. I've included my email here and my website. I will drop my email in the chat as well. I think we're doing okay on time, Jeff. Am I right? Do we have time for questions?
Yeah, we definitely have a few minutes for questions.
Okay. Oh, and Ricia put the Vote ER link in the chat. So she's put in the specific link for Fordham. If you are interested in having Vote ER collaborate with your university, you can reach out to them or reach out to me and I'll connect you. They can make, where is my lanyard? It's around here somewhere. And so Ricia, if you have your lanyard, you should turn your video on and show us. And they're very cool. But that is definitely an opportunity. We do have a comment. I don't want to say your name wrong. Erlix says that she was a poll worker in Puerto Rico. It was very hard and you didn't get compensation. That is pretty rare. Mostly people do get compensated for it. But it is a long day, right? Like I'm usually at the polls from like 5 in the morning until whenever we're finished. In the 2020 election, I counted 1,000 absentee ballots on election day. It was a lot of work, but my commitment in my town is we pay our poll workers minimum wage because economic justice. And that's really the only way you can make sure that you get more people in to work the polls, right? Is to make sure that you're making it worth their while. Oh, and Allison says she's a poll worker. Yay, look at you already get to check one thing off of that list. Are there other questions? Jeff, did you see anything else in the chat that I missed?
I think you covered most of what I saw in there. I think I saw Lori hold up a badge for Vote ER. Is that correct? There she is.
Yay.
It's a little hard to focus on it. Try to share her Vote ER lanyard.
Oh, that's right. You have it from the campaign school, Lori. So the voting, so what these are is your school can order them, or your agency can order them, and they have a QR code on them. So if you're talking, and these were developed by an emergency room doc who realized that the people who were coming to the ER were people who were the least likely to be registered to vote. And he just created these lanyards and started saying to people in the ER, hey, are you registered to vote? Would you like to do it really quickly? And so you can just point a smartphone at the lanyard, and it takes them right to it connects through Turbo Vote, and they can register. And the other cool thing about it is they are registering themselves to vote. It's not you doing it for them. So if there are any mistakes, it's on them and it's not on you, which is, as like somebody who does this a lot, I'm always petrified of making a mistake and actually disenfranchising someone. So to have them sort of be responsible for it is a really nice thing. Anjali says poll workers are paid $300 in New Jersey. So it's not, I mean, but you know, $300 every year, every time we have an election, I take my, whatever it is, my $250 or whatever it ends up being after election day. And I am very, very excited for it. Oh, it looks like Vandika, I think, asked about the SPEAK acronym. SPEAK is social policy education. What is the A? The K is knowledge. I can't remember what the A is. SPEAK is based out of the University of Texas at Austin. They put out an incredible series of videos, and they just started a podcast series around political social work. I would highly, highly recommend. And they do a bunch of advocacy and voter work as well. So if you Google SPEAK UT Austin or Rick Hofer, you will find it. Here, I'll put his name in the chat because it's a little bit hard to spell. If you Google Rick Hofer and SPEAK, you will come up with it. And I'll put my name in here. Any other questions before I turn it back over?
And Dr. Lane, we will, if you want to share that information via email, I'll reach out to all the presenters for resources and slides that we can send to people as follow-up. So anything else you'd like to share, links and things, we can include in the follow-up email. Okay,
great. Yeah, I can even try to put it in the chat right now if I can think and click at the same time.
So we are just about out of time for the day. I know it's been a very, very packed day. Thank you, Dr. Lane, for your presentation. It was fantastic. This whole day has been inspiring, and I can see from the comments in the chat that many of you have felt the same way. Before we wrap up today, we do have a couple of other resources from NASW that we'd like to share with you. And so our interns, Razia and Matt, will put these links in the chat, and we'll also email them to you. We have an advocacy toolkit that we created that you can access online. It's in a flipbook viewer called Issue, but you can also download that document to your computer, and you can share it with other folks. It's got all kinds of resources and videos about getting involved in policy and politics in New Jersey and around the country. Our former intern and BSW rep to the NASW Board of Directors, Jack Surzan from Seton Hall, says it's a great resource. Jack helped us put that together last year when he was here. So thanks, Jack, and thanks for being here today. We also are going to be sharing a link to the lead page on our website. That's where we're going to have links to archived videos from today and any other materials that we can share. Again, we'll email that stuff to you too, but Razia and Matt, if you could drop the link to the lead page in the chat. It's at naswnj.org. And if you go to, I believe the link says advocacy, and then under one of the drop downs, there'll be lead. There's also links there to find out more about our Political Action Committee, PACE, and also about our legislative priorities and testimony that we've made to the New Jersey legislature in the past year. You can find all those resources again at naswnj.org. Lori, there is no certificate for attending, but we will be following up with faculty based on the attendance checks to document that you were here today. A couple of other ways to keep in touch with NASW so you can be aware of our efforts and our advocacy work and get engaged. Follow us on social media if you're not. We are on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and on TikTok. And our handle on all of those sites is at NASWNJ, except TikTok, I think it's at NASWNJ1. But if you search NASWNJ, you should find our handles and us and follow us on social. Also, if you go to our website, naswnj.org, and click on news, you'll see a link for newsletters where you can sign up to receive Newswire, our weekly e-newsletter. It's free and keeps you up to date on all the comings and goings on NASW and in the social work profession in New Jersey. So with that, we will be bringing our day to a close. Thank you to all of our presenters and panelists. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your insight and experience. I also want to give a big shout out to our NASW NJ interns for helping assemble today and working on things. To our folks that presented this morning from interns, Leah, Jeanette, Elizabeth, and Charles, thank you for your great presentation. And to Razia and Matt, thank you for being here on the back end and helping to manage the chat queue and other things. This has been a great presentation. Please watch your email. It'll take us a few days to put everything together, but we will be following up via email with everybody who registered for LEAD, whether or not they're here today, with links to the videos to watch, with links to resources, and other things that the presenters want to provide. So thanks very much. I hope this has inspired you to get involved in politics, in policy. There's so many different ways to get involved. I'm going to drop my email in the chat box right now, and it will also be in the follow-up email you receive. It's jfeldman.naswnj@socialworkers.org. If you have questions about policy and politics, reach out. If you are interested in being an intern at NASW New Jersey over the summer or during the next school year, reach out and send your resume. Also, if you're interested in interning in a legislative office or with a policy and advocacy association, reach out and I'll try and make a connection on your behalf. So thanks so much, everybody. Have a great day, and we will be in touch soon.
Great job, Jeff. Thank you very much. Great lead day.
Thanks, Dr. Battle.